Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Amy Fowler. Really pleased to be with you. I'm a leader coach, and I have the privilege of having 4 outstanding superintendents with me today. We're going to have a panel discussion to talk about some of the challenges in front of them. And I'm going to pick on Seth. Seth, will you start us off with introductions? And we're going to have you introduce yourself, where you're from, a little bit about your district, and one thing that's not work-related.
Good afternoon, everyone. Seth Hartstein, Superintendent of the Sheboygan Area School District. Sheboygan, about an hour north of here, right on Lake Michigan, 10,000 students. About 50% of our students are BIPOC students, 50% are white, about 17% of our population is special ed, and 17% of our population is GL. One of the, in terms of staffing, we have about 800 teachers and about 1,500 total staff members. So consider ourselves a large urban district. With that comes some of the challenges that we're seeing from time to time. My mic's going in and out, it sounds like. I've been in Sheboygan for, I'll be starting my 24th year, my 5th year as superintendent. I've got the mic that doesn't work.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeff Fleig. I'm the superintendent of the Fond du Lac School District, which is about an hour north and a little bit west of here on Lake Winnebago. We have 6,800 students, 15 schools, one large high school with about 2,000 students in. 50% of our students are from low-income families, and about another 30% are students of color, and about, I believe, we're about 7-8% of students are emerging bilinguals. And we are a district that's not where we need to be in terms of performance, and I'm really pleased to be working with Studer. We have a lot of work to do.
Casey and I have been superintendent in DC Everest for nearly 30 days.
Oh, I'm not the youngest guy up here then, huh? All right.
Whew, I feel like I'm nailing it.
Good job.
Yeah. I've been in the district for 16 years. I have an amazing team. A good chunk of them are here today. So let's see, district, DC Everest is in north central Wisconsin, about 6,100 students. We are about 39% free and reduced, 27% students of color, high Southeast Asian Hmong population. We feel good about a lot of our achievement, but we're not there across the board. Like so many of you, I think we're coming out of our cocoon post-COVID, if you can say that. And so attendance engagement, especially at the secondary level, is a huge focus for us right now as we continue to try to provide kids lots of pathways. So.
And welcome, I'm Jenny Starck, superintendent in the Cadott School District. It's a small rural school district, about 30 miles kind of northeast of Eau Claire, if you know where that is. We have about 850 students. This is my 5th year in that district, and it's a district that really up until maybe 3 years ago, we had no English language learners. Now we have, like 10. About 50% being reduced lunch, not a lot of minorities. And at the time I started there, when we looked at the PTI report cards, our high school had been a couple of years of failing to meet expectations, which was a big issue in our school and in our community and the culture there. So that's something that we focused on a lot moving forward is the whole scorecard process around student outcomes and student achievement. Studer has preceded me in that district. I believe it's about the 7th year there. So it's exciting to continue learning.
Thank you. So as part of our panel conversation, I'm going to ask Casey if you wouldn't mind going first on this question, and then we'll just kind of go the other direction and we'll rotate around. But a lot of us are coming out of the COVID time period, and for a while we could have gotten real focused in on what wasn't working and what was hard. But I'd like you to tell us, what are some muscles or kind of skills that your district gained during that time that you think are still going to be useful as we move forward in coming back and the next work ahead of us?
Our team has a fairly long history with Studer too, and one of the things that we really appreciate is how Studer's helped us identify our culture and put words to it. I think the muscle that's been flexed in the period of time we're in right now is the ability to be nimble, but still focused on what work is most important. I think for people new to our organization, it's maybe among the most frustrating aspects because we it will feel in a moment or on an initiative that we turn quickly, but it's when an opportunity presents itself that lets us take the work further, gets us closer to that mission. So we partnered with a number of community members to open a micro school at the elementary level that really had a heavy donor funding to get up and off the ground. That's now part of our District K-5. We are in the midst of a $30 million turf facility that's going to be entirely donor funded. It was not in the scale that it is now on our radar, but when opportunities that are going to make things better for our community and better for our kids come up, we turn quickly and move. And obviously during COVID, I think we all had to do that. And I think we've clung to the bigger mission as we've kind of wound along that trip that we've all been on.
I would say in Fond du Lac, this ethos of care. We have mental health services in all our buildings now. And I think this taking care of our kids, when you have a high number of students who are from low-income families and providing support that they need and also ensuring that they're getting the resources that they need. So I think that's been developed. I can't take any credit for it. It was in place when I arrived, and it's doing quite well. So I think that's probably the big thing that we really, I think, got really good at in the pandemic.
I think from Sheboygan, one of the things we really strengths I think we really built in that muscle we flexed was around creativity, but also around this can-do attitude. We heard some other speakers talk about that date in March when all of a sudden we're going virtual, and how are we going to feed 10,000 students? How are we going to provide school supplies? How are we going to get technology out? How are we going to communicate with our families? So it helped us understand that a lot is possible, and that also it's caused us to reflect on, oftentimes it's, well, we've never done it that way, so we're going to just keep doing the status quo. And this challenged us and really helped us understand that we can be nimble, we can make decisions, and we can make changes, and it's okay, but we really ought to communicate those and work collaboratively with our staff to do so. So those are some things I think that we've taken away from this COVID experience.
I think for us, it's been part of it is the idea of kind of short key messages. We got really good at having to make decisions without all of the information or hardly any information or information we didn't have any background in. All of a sudden we were learning things about healthcare that we didn't even, we might be repeating a message that we didn't have a lot of confidence or background learning. So trying to make that into short key messages for people. The other piece was, I mean, just an example of that is we started to do weekly online optional staff meetings, 15 minutes every Tuesday to communicate, here's our COVID numbers, here's what's happening. And kind of back to that mental health and support, one of the things that we have that many districts have is employee achievement program called Through Real Living. It had increased some in utilization, but not a lot. And what happened is they were optional meetings, so I just thought when people quit logging on, I'll either reduce the number of meetings or stop having them, and it never happened. We always had almost all staff there. And to be honest, I started to think, well, what am I going to talk about next Tuesday? So what I did was I took the EAP programming and picked a piece. So I'll talk about, here's the financial support. If you want to learn more about that, here's the brochure, here's the website. And then I would talk about family supports. If you have issues with caregiving, here's how you can get support with that. So it was something that I wouldn't have gone into probably otherwise, that will continue going forward just because of how well it was received, and then again, how it increased participation and support of our staff.
That's really great. Thank you so much for those examples. Another question that we wanted to talk about was, many of us have been reading in the news about changing expectations or interactions with our community over the last couple of years. Perhaps parents having different expectations of schools or different kinds of issues. What's been a way that you've been adapting to those changes and expectations? And if you could illustrate it with a story, that'd be super helpful. And well, Jeff, I guess you get to go first on this one.
I think, as you know, we're in a politically charged climate right now. And I think, I don't know about Seth or Jenny or Casey, but we've received a couple open records requests in the last year. And
Just a couple.
yeah, well, no, not quite, a little more than that. And I think I anticipated that coming in as I was talking to my former superintendent I worked for, and I think tried to be very intentional around building trust at the board level and with the community in terms of being very honest, transparent, messaging the why, and having a consistent why message that was repeated and repeated and repeated to just really help navigate the I don't know what you call when we started last fall with some of the record requests, but there was just a lot of distractions, and to eliminate them so the people who are doing the work can do the work.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Amy, that we, in terms of expectations, I think now more than ever when we were all virtual, parents saw the firsthand experiences and view into the classroom that many didn't before because the screen's right there and the child's on and the parents in the background. And so we received a lot more requests for information, a lot more questions about the content, what we were doing. We talked a lot about providing our staff grace when parents were saying, well, I didn't like that lesson and I don't think the teacher said this right word, and are you sure that's the proper assignment? And we were all learning, and so we had to talk about where we're at and that grace piece. But it also opened our eyes that why are we not more transparent with our families, and why aren't we not wanting our parents to see what we're doing? Because although we were receiving those complaints from some parents and questions, we were also receiving like compliments, and this is awesome, and I can't believe the teachers were doing so much during the COVID time. So we were able to champion that. I think the other thing that changed was the politicalness, and I'll just piggyback on Jeff a little bit, is we had a really strong group that came out, pro-mask, no mask, vaccination. We were running vaccination clinics, and we had picketers, and there I am with a line of picketers and parents, and thought we were gonna have a little conflict, and we had to call the police and the whole 9 yards talking about vaccinations. But that just opened up a lot of other conversations about what else are you doing to my child kind of conversations. And so really trying to develop those relationships where in the past, I think our tendency was to write people off when they question. It's like, you don't really understand and we don't have to deal with you per se. But it really helped us to re-engage, and let's purposefully. So one of the stories that I'll share about that is our local political Republican Party in Sheboygan County was putting out lots of information about what they think schools should do and what we weren't doing. So let's go to breakfast. So I went to breakfast with the two leaders of that party, and we had a great conversation. And I also was able to read their material and say, you're talking about transparent education, you're talking about transparent funding. Why are you supporting certain things in the state of Wisconsin, such as a voucher program, which isn't transparent? And they went, well, yes, it is. I said, let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about the transparency. Let's talk about the open records requests and what you can and can't request from us in the voucher schools. And all of a sudden now I have two supporters of people trying to say, I think we got to question why we're doing the things we're doing. And yet I had people tell me, don't go to lunch or breakfast with those individuals. They've got a hidden agenda. Actually, now we're in a better understanding place, and I don't feel like it's a confrontational place that we're in anymore. That's just an example.
Sure. For us, I think one of the pieces was, like everyone has talked about, our community expectations became more polarized. And as a result, what happens is more people are not satisfied. They're not satisfied because your COVID restrictions are too loose. And then the other group is not satisfied because your COVID restrictions are too tight. And trying to, again, message that in ways to people in a frequent, concise, so that at least they understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. We spent a lot of time, like many districts, doing kind of a COVID decision-making rubric that talked about the percent of students. And I learned early on that regardless of DPI, CDC recommendations, one of the issues with being a rural district is if we are online, the majority of our students do not have access. They don't have broadband. We had a lot of hotspots. We found even for families that wasn't enough bandwidth to do some of the things that they needed to do. So we learned that unless we kind of reached a crisis point, we would be in person. that created stress for staff. So how could we manage that? How could we deal with that? And a lot of it, again, was around communication and trying to be flexible and trying to say, we're going to do this for 4 weeks. We're going to revisit. We're going to do an after action report and talk about what might need to change. So it kind of blends with question one, but it created a way for us to have a lot more flexibility and maybe to try things. Ted Nitsky from CISA 6, if you've heard him, he'll talk about fail fast, that, you can try something, and we always worried that, oh my gosh, we better not try it because if it doesn't work, kind of the idea of perfection is the enemy of progress. Sometimes you have to just try it and then be willing to readjust.
Yeah, boy, I mentioned I was the new guy, so I thought I'd be really creative and talk about the trust crisis, but it appears that's sort of been taken. Yeah, we've all been on the wrong side of the table having public comment screamed at us about any number of topics in the last 18 months or so. Maybe I think the stories I had are sort of been told, but maybe a helpful thing that we've been doing is that, similar to what Jeff described, is trying to sit down with those people and humanize them to some extent. And you probably are not going to agree. You're probably not going to move, every person, but you may in the process build that relationship. And I think that trust crisis thing, which is ripping the fabric of our country apart right now, and if we think we're the foundation in K-12, we're going to have to be a part of helping that be better and help people trust us better. So a lot of coalition building. It's the lunches and the phone calls to the people that you maybe least want to communicate with. But for us, there's been some other things too, with mental health challenges that so many of us have faced, and trying to build some county-wide coalitions that share and don't lay that entirely at the feet of schools. So both informally in those one-on-one conversations, and then I think formally trying to say this is a community issue. We want to be a part of the solution, and not shying away from some of that criticism, not being afraid to be transparent, but saying, well, what does that mean to you? What are we not transparent about? You're only going to find that out if you really sit down and engage with people.
Thank you so much. So before I pepper them with a few more questions, I'm going to ask you to turn to your table and take a little stock in what you've experienced in your own districts, and what are the muscles and the skills that you've developed over the last 2 or 3 years that will serve you well as you take on the next challenges, and how are you addressing any of those changing expectations. So the same 2 questions for your table, and we'll call you back, somehow get all your attention when you're all talking. Thank you, Gail. Gail's doing our chime. She's great and helpful. So I hope you had a few moments to think about what muscles your district has been gaining as you prepare to go back. What we're going to do now is turn our attention a little bit more to how our superintendents are thinking about the future. And what I'd like to ask, I think I'll start, well, Jenny, if you'll start for us on this one. As you think about this upcoming year, what do you see as your biggest opportunities, or perhaps what are your greatest priorities?
I think a great opportunity that we have is sort of, again, to refocus on our strategic plan, our annual scorecard, and the student outcomes has always been the priority of that. But even the other pieces, back to one of the things we did was able to be our kind of rock in all of the other messiness, that we still did our monthly reporting. We still always would check our data. So I think the opportunity, even as I've been learning here, is to revisit things that we thought were hardwired that maybe we're not, maybe rounding some of those and getting back at that, and the gratitude piece. So I think that's very exciting to me, because I think people are finally, I think all of us were at a point where we kept thinking we're climbing the mountain and we just had to get to the other side. There isn't really another side anymore for us to get to. We're just going to learn to work in this new environment and be great at it. but it's going to take some practice.
I remember the disruption of Act 10 and the similar fears around losing people and brain drain and no one going into education. And I know we're feeling that in a different and exaggerated way right now. But I always appreciated our school board in particular taking that moment and instead of, I guess at that time, using the tools as a bludgeon against our people, but instead leverage that moment to be the preferred employer. And I think we have that moment again. The market's even smaller. It's more competitive for all of us, but I think the chance to be the place that, I think Corey did a great job. I mean, it's the people. We have amazing ideas for kids, but it doesn't happen without them. So can we get more talent? Can we retain them? So we're trying some different things. We're moving to PTO because of we're burnt out, we're tired, we don't have the flexibility. It's not an attractive profession to go into with a young family. So it's a crazy time to do that with sub shortages left and right. So it's super, super risky, but we're betting that our people are going to make good decisions. We've got the data that suggests it'll be solid, and ultimately think it's probably the one big thing we can do that's cost neutral that might keep people with us to serve kids. So I'd say that's probably a high priority for us at this moment.
Just to add a little bit to what Jenny said, we just finished our strategic plan. Did it in about 4 months with Tim's help from Studer, and so we did it pretty quickly, and I think it's really going to provide us some guidance going forward, and really looking forward to that, ensuring that accountability to myself, keeping the work focused on what we need to be doing going forward, as well as keeping the board focused. And so I think that's what really lies ahead for us. And I think what I'm really concerned about going forward is with the pandemic, I refer to it as a hangover that won't go away, sometimes worse than turning 21. And of how we have a crisis with young men right now in terms of going to college. So last fall was the lowest percentage of freshmen, men that ever went to college. 40% of all college freshmen were men last year. That's not how many, out of that percentage, I would imagine much less will persist to their second year. So looking at how we can do high school differently is really what I think is the opportunity that we got to start looking at that. And had a good talk with Seth. He's got some great ideas on that already. So I'm looking forward, that's what's kind of what we're looking forward to this year. So
we're looking forward in Sheboygan to, the continuous improvement process. We started that a couple years ago, and now with Amy supporting us as a coach through Studer to really fine tune that process, add the various surveys that you can access through Studer, and really then how do we add rounding to that? So that's part of our long range plan and that whole continuous improvement model. And getting all of the departments within our district, from food service to facilities to transportation, our technology teams, all in that same mindset. We were always in that kind of mindset, if you will, from a school-based side, but let's talk about it from an employee side, because that's the other piece. And I know Casey talked about that employee side. One of the things that we were really finding in Sheboygan was that our staff are not outselling the good things about the district. It's been this kind of, woe is us, this is not the greatest profession, don't go into this profession message. And we looked at the research and we looked at our own data that shows most of our employees are coming within 40 miles of Sheboygan. That's their hometown. They're returning to it. They're growing up here. They're working here. And yet, if our staff aren't out able to share the good messages. So we really focus a little bit on communication in terms of how can we get messages out district-wide, and we learned that from some of our surveys that our staff could talk about their school, but they couldn't. Somebody on the street would say, tell me something going on at North High School, and an elementary teacher would say, I haven't the foggiest idea. And so how do we share good stories and share those positive messages? They'd always know about the bad stuff and could share that, but how do we share the positive stuff? And then we also created a retention group with our employees, and really saying, what are you after? If it's PTO, if it's other things, what are you after? And also providing information to them, because they're not always, and we haven't done a good job, quite frankly, our team as a ministry, we haven't done a good job of saying, these are all the benefits you do have, and where do we stand amongst our competition? So we were losing some people to other districts only to find that a couple years later they were turning around and coming back and saying, oh, I didn't realize how good I had it. Because we never let them know, where do we stand on benefits? Where do we stand on pay? Where do we stand on hours in front of kids, caseload, workloads, et cetera? And when we started compiling that data, all of a sudden the light went on like, oh, we have it really good. And how can we share that message? So just a couple of things that we're looking forward to next year.
Thank you. And as you look ahead even further, 5-10 years from now, what do you think is going to be the same or different from how we experience our profession today? Seth, will you start us with that one?
Staffing still to be a concern that we're going to have, and the recruitment and excitement of our high school graduates wanting to then enter into the education setting, whether that's a teacher or support staff role. I think the continued competitiveness and people looking at how we fund schools from the funding aspect to the putting up sometimes false information about the discipline problems we have or don't have, and this whole notion of competition, and how do we really as a group say it's not really about competition, it's about we want success for all students, and here's what we can offer, and how do we make a difference with the students that we serve, and that we're not afraid of competition. That's sometimes how our local lawmakers are saying we have to provide parents other options because of competition, and you're afraid of that. And it's not. Let's have that conversation. So I think it's just this public schools and what that looks like as compared to other types of schools will be a challenge coming up that we need to head on.
For our community, I think one of the big positives will be faster broadband expansion. It will still take probably 5 years or even longer for all of our families to have that, but it's been an interesting community barrier as many occupations become more flexible. People can have opportunities from work from home. Some of our families, their parents could not because they couldn't. I, myself, if I need something that has a certain bandwidth, I have to go to school to do it or it won't work in my home. So I think that will be a big plus. And I think as we move forward, even when we celebrated with our staff, we were not a one-to-one district before COVID. So we're ordering Chromebooks, sending them out, setting up, Google Classrooms people didn't know. And we took some time and said, talk about the things you learned and are doing that you never did 3 months ago. And it was a lot. And so the learning curve for our staff was tremendous. And so I think part of it is to celebrate that. The other part is to, again, help them continue on the path. And I think sometimes the challenge is to keep that exciting and motivating and not always switch to try something new and just get it hardwired and make it working. But I think the other piece will be probably more flexibility in student and employee options, whether it's moving to PTO or even I've talked to some superintendents to get some support service special education providers like speech language, or they'll have an opportunity to work from home 1 day a week or something like that, or a report day. So I think those will be big changes we'll have to continue to address.
I mean, it's an awesome time to be an educator. I don't think there's ever been a time that it's been more important to lead. There are opportunities. If we can mend some of these fences and somehow maybe through great education, the citizenry of tomorrow, 10 years from now, they're more informed, more willing to look at the data. And my hope is that we are having conversations around how do we get upstream of the challenges that we're responding to right now. We're opening a 3K next year based on a community partnership grant that we have that we're hoping engages especially a second language population in a different way and starts to show some solutions. I mentioned the mental health piece before. So I hope if we can build coalitions and have conversations, even with our employers, when the people screaming at us on the other side of the board are holding us accountable for mental health, yet at the same time saying, don't talk about SEL, don't give kids skills to arm themselves and be healthy. If my ironic face came on, I apologize. My hope, though, is that we can have authentic conversations about what matters for kids and put solutions in place that are truly preventative in nature. And I think we're on the edge of a lot of those conversations right now. It's exciting to be able to do that. scary at the same time.
I think what will be the same is we're going to have kids that are going to be coming to school who are counting on us, and families that we have a moral and legal obligation to ensure they get an outstanding education so that they can leave us and go do what they want to do, not what we think they should do. And that's the mission right now, and it's not going to change 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Our jobs are too important, what each of us do each day to impact our kids. I think what's going to look different is going to be staffing, and I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I don't know. I'm a parent of a high school senior to be, and he's thinking about education. I think he's crazy. Although, as I say, I don't think I'd do anything differently. As I sit here after 29 years, I wouldn't do it any differently, but school hasn't been a great place for him. But he's thinking about it, and I'm going, oh my gosh, oh boy. So I think we have to look at how staffing is going to look and how to make this an inviting profession again, as it was for me in 1990, I don't know, whatever, 4, can't remember right now, how it was for me back then. And I think that for all of us that we're working back then to ensure that we are having great people that are going to educate our future and impact them.
You were a prodigy early teacher at 12, right? Yeah. All right. So before we go to our last question, I'm going to have you turn to your table again and think about, in your own context, what do you see as your highest priority this year, and what might it be looking like 5, 10 years from now, and how are you planning for that new endeavor? We'll give you about 5, 7 minutes.